So first off, so I know I've gotten into the field of holistic healing. I started like 2 years ago. Yeah, and then I began with biomagnetic therapy, which is it was begun by Dr. Goyce in Mexico, which is pretty cool. Came from Mexico. That's where my parents, well, that's where my lineage is from. I learned it from some monks. They're called Ishaya monks, and then from then on, I just picked it up and I got deeper, and then that's when I learned about the emotion code, which uses magnets also, but it also, is a little it's much simpler than biomagnetic therapy. And then from then on, I looked into the body code, and those are the things that I've used, and they've been very. I've learned a lot about the healing journey, a lot of things that I picked up. So I'm curious about Reiki. You, can you like go back to what you said? The masters and how you started. Your mom even being connected.
So I first found out about Reiki because I was a young man in college. And I'm sure, every young man in college knows that there are young women in college.
Yes, sir.
And so I had went out the night before for some studying, which
Interesting.
which was true. I
Okay.
went to go study, and like actually go study. Um, but I'm hanging out with this girl, and stuff happened. And
Okay.
so the next day I come back covered in hickeys everywhere. And I walk in and my mom's like, "Oh, what happened? What happened? Did somebody strangle you? Did you get in a fight or anything?" And she gets closer cuz there's like bruising and everything all up and
Yeah.
down my neck, and she gets closer and she realizes they're hickeys. And so she's like, "Oh, I thought you were studying." And, I had to just be smooth about it. I was like, I was studying. I was studying female biology,
Nice, man.
female anatomy.
Doing that. Yeah, that's it.
And, um, yeah, I think I was 18 at the time. And so she was just starting to study Reiki. And she had the Reiki table right there, and she was like, "Oh, this is unacceptable. Here, like I'm gonna do Reiki on you." Which, if you know my mom, that was just her clever excuse of she's not actually upset about the hickeys. She's just,
Yeah.
I want to practice,
Yeah.
and this is like a really good
Good
excuse.
opportunity. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, mom, sure, I will humor you. So she did a Reiki session on me. Um, Nothing too profound, it was like an interesting concept, and I think it was about a year later, or maybe a couple months. She Because they offer a lot of classes, right? Like walking the dead, reading auras, crystal healing, past life regressions. Pretty cool stuff. The past life regressions. And she said she wanted me to take the classes and just get an idea about it. And at the time, um I was doing sort of like quasi pseudo shamanic healing
Mhm.
as like a personal thing.
Right.
Um, so I said, hey, why not? Right? Like it's similar, it's related. I'll probably learn uh, something related to the occult by engaging with this. Um, but yeah, I mean, Reiki 1, Reiki 2, Reiki 2 Advanced, which is like your introduction to uh, mastery, Reiki Master. Um, and it operates off of a current. So you need to be initiated in Reiki 1 in order to have the current be upgraded through Reiki 2, and you need Reiki 2 before you have the current upgraded by Reiki 2 Advanced. Once you have Reiki 2 Advanced, you could do something like walking the dead through the Akashic records.
Mm.
Aura reading is all you're doing with aura reading is you're using like I don't really know how to explain it, but anybody can do it. You're essentially using your eyes to not focus and kind of just see the peripheral uh, of anything really. So you'll see the etheric double, and then off of the etheric double, you could see the aura. So anybody can do that. You could do it in probably 5 minutes if you understand the basics. Um, so that's an interesting class. It could certainly help you with Reiki or healing or really anything. Because all it is it's just a visual trick. It's not magic. There's nothing to it. If you let your eyes not focus on something, you'll see everything. Is any of that real? Who knows? But also, who cares, right? If it's real, it's real. If it means anything, it means something.
Yeah, I think something the I mean, I'm just gonna add this, and then I do want to go a little deeper into it for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think for people to understand, and for sure,
Did I lose you?
but for example, if it's like, who cares if it's real, it's real, right? That's the attitude of an individual who is experimenting and is open to possibilities, I believe. So if for me, you know, people won't know it's real until it's scientifically proven. But you know, how are you gonna, you know, science has a lot of catching up to do to be able to really, you know, validate this. And if anything, you know, I think there's even like powers that at play that don't allow for these things to be studied and taken seriously either. I think I mean, I've seen it myself, and I think there was a book that I read on, it was on magic, but the guy was a PhD, and he was looking at all the scientific experiments that have already been done. For example, even like the CIA was studying
Yep.
psychics, like trying to use remote viewing, and they found that there was some effectiveness, and they even used psychics with remote viewing. Um, this is like known, like the government knows about this, but uh, but nobody's going to talk about this, right? So, I mean, I just want to put that out there. I forgot the book. I think it's like Real Magic. I'll look it up right now. He talks about even people predicting like computer generated numbers. So, but you know, he mentioned towards the end that nobody's going to really talk about this just because the public isn't ready for it. And also, like, there's powers at play, like, you know, the government isn't going to want, you know, people to discover these things, because that can lead to, for example, the death or the destruction of the pharmaceutical industry, for example, pertaining to
Yep.
this specific topic around health and wellness. So going back to what we were saying, the reason why I wanted this to be recorded was because,
Oh yeah.
for example, even like there's a lot of people that are curious about Reiki, especially me. I hardly know anything about it. Although I have experience with holistic healing, I could give you some of my experiences, and then you can give me kind of like a Reiki background on it. You know, some great Reiki
Sure.
context.
That'd be pretty
So
cool.
yeah, I mean, so I'll dive in, and then I'll share what I have. Well, let me go deeper into your background though. So you said you're a Reiki master, right?
Yep. Yep. Through Lourdes Gray. So let me think here. There was Usui, the naval doctor, which I forget his name. He taught Takata. Takata taught John Harvey Gray. John Harvey Gray taught Lourdes, and Lourdes taught me. So that's so I'm sixth generation. Um, direct lineage. You see a lot of these, and we previously discussed this, but for the context of the video, you see a lot of people initiated into Reiki, and they'll be initiated through um, the internet, through a book, uh, online, so through like a Skype call or what have you. And does that actually work? Is it enough to have just the raw instruction? Does the current actually go through your hands? Does your crown chakra actually um, get attuned? Because it's attunement. You're attuning the hands specifically, and you're attuning the crown chakra. So in occult terms, you would understand this as a current. And now this is kind of where I exit my real understanding of the topic, but currents are how the occult operates at the energetic level. If you're not initiated, if you don't hold the current, then you're not actually going to be able to operate and interface with that energy. So I think stuff like Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley's Odo Temple Orientis or whatever, OTO. These are currents. You could kind of see it in Freemasonry. In Freemasonry, you're initiated. Is that a current? Probably. So you see a lot of these Reiki practitioners. Oh, I'm a Reiki practitioner. Oh yeah, who's your instructor? Who initiated you? Instructor? Initiation? No, I learned this from a book. Okay, which generation are you? Generation? What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's stuff like that. I mean, who's to say if any of it's real? But it does call into question, do you actually hold the energy? Are you actually capable of harnessing these things? Does it flow through you? And can you externalize it into the space around you? Who knows? But I think it's very worth at least considering and thinking about.
That's interesting because I had a so my mom is she's from Mexican culture. They are very
Yep.
much into what people call brujos, but what we would
Oh,
call
yep.
shamans, right?
Yep. Yep.
Shamans and psychics, etc. And curanderos also, that would be the name. Um, so she got me connected with one of them, one of the brujos. She was a bruja, and I was tell her about the work I did, and then my mom asked her about like what she thought of me as a healer, and she said that because I meditate so much and because I'm so centered in my practice and so disciplined in my practice, she said that I've tapped into a current, and that current has allowed me to make work that even maybe she wouldn't be able to do. So I'm just making that connection that she said about currents, which is very interesting to me. What
Yeah.
would you add to that? I'm kind of curious.
So, I mean, and we kind of touched about it in the Enlightenment discussion. To preface this, to kind of get to the core and the crux of the situation, where did Usui figure out Reiki from? And this is passed on through oral tradition. Usui meditated on a mountaintop, I think, for 21 days without food and water. And at the end of those 21 days, I'm not sure if it's actually the end or if it's through the process. Um, he understood the symbols. The symbols came to him. The energies came to him. So I look at these things. If you want to attain enlightenment, for example, maybe don't find it through a book. Maybe don't find it through teachings. Maybe just figure out the original person who said that they figured it out. Maybe probably just do whatever it is that they did. If you want to become a shaman or a healer, maybe don't read it through or learn it through reading a book. Maybe you do have to, or maybe it's better to just do whatever it is that they did as they learned it, as they figured it out. So Asui got the current. I don't think that they would use that terminology, but I would understand it to be current. He came about the current by simply meditating, essentially speaking. Um, so if somebody else wants to do this, maybe that's how you do it. But if you want to just get the current from somebody else, if they actually hold the current, then yeah, you could probably just get the current from somebody else. Would it be as strong? I don't know. I mean, these aren't really scientific concepts. They're philosophical in nature. So yeah, I mean, if you developed a current, well, how does anybody develop a current? How did the original people develop the currents? It's through practice. It's through whatever it is that they're actually doing. So whatever it is that you did specifically, you probably tapped into something, or you generated your own thing, something like that. Probably. To me, that seems very reasonable. Currents are all around us. It's just how do you want to manifest them, embody them, harness them, and then materialize them outside of you. Something like that. I was on a phone call with my buddy earlier today discussing something similar. Where do ideas arrive from? I think if you want to take like a very materialistic, atheistic, secular stance, thoughts are just a product of the mind. I wonder though, what if there are things external to us, like a spirit, if you will, or an energy or something external, and we're just conduits? If you open yourself up and you view and treat yourself as a conduit, if something else comes in, now it's interfacing through you. So if you have an idea, it will use you as a host to enact its will through you, something like that, very basically speaking. That to me doesn't seem all that complicated or anything that you really need to take all that seriously. If there's any truth to the matter, why not lean into it? Something like that, very basically speaking.
I really like
So,
that because then. Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I mean, to bring it back in context specifically to yourself, if you did tap into something, why doubt it? Why think anything of it? If you did, then you did. And if you didn't, well, you're still doing something, right? You're still interacting and interfacing with some sort of energy, some sort of thought, even if it's completely self-derived and self-generated. It's very possible that people can generate their own energy, their own source of something.
Right. The only thing I would say is the difference would be, being tuned into source is like, I believe that even I've had experiences, for example, like I had a healing session done with my mom. I was using her as a remote. Um, it was a remote session. So
Yep.
the healing was being done on her uncle, and I was doing it, and in my like in my head, like I see things, and
Yeah. Yep.
so I'm used to seeing like people, seeing energies, hearing voices, getting glimpses of like, okay, do this, do that.
Yep.
Uh, but it was interesting because my mom also tuned into that, but it was too much for her. So she started to see my uncle, but in his suffering, because
Yep.
obviously we were healing him and he had physical ailments, and she saw his suffering and tuned into his suffering, and she started to take it on for herself.
Yep.
And I told her, do not do that, release and just send him love, because what I noticed there was like, okay, I do this all the time, but I didn't realize that it could actually affect me
Oh yeah.
in the way that it affected my mom. um and I've also heard people, for example, even in psychologists, and this is very interesting because this will even go into the field of psychology, where I met this one person. Her daughter was a psychologist. She trained for therapy, I believe, to be a therapist. She got her master's, etc. She went through everything, and she ended up leaving because it was too much for her. She said that she
Yeah.
kept taking on her clients' suffering. And I also think that there's another thing that I believe that some psychologists are too cold, where I feel
Yep.
like instead of them being able to embrace it and transmute it, they basically put a wall and work on it from a very detached perspective, almost hands off.
Yep.
But I believe that a true healer, and this is what a psychologist should be, I believe also, is able to transmute these energies into something higher. And in order to do that, you can only your ego self is very small. And this going back to the first point I want to make, which is yes, you can channel higher and you can also channel from yourself. You can generate from yourself, but it'll
Yep.
always be better if you take from the infinite source and direct it with your um with your body as the transmitter versus you generating energy from your body and then putting that on somebody else, because then that's going to be very limited, and you will also get tired, I believe. I feel like or if you don't get tired, you will at least have a lot of limitation to your capacity to channel these energies. So that being said, and then going back to the psychology thing, I want to finish that point, which is that I believe that these fields like psychology and then also these fields of holistic healing, they're really going to be one. Even the book Hands of Light by Barbara, I believe Barbara Brennan, she was a psychologist and she got into holistic healing also. So it's going to require both of these things. But I think more importantly, the last point I want to make, which is in dance, there's this very sacred approach to the way they do these specific moves. They came from, I believe, Cuba, but from like tribes. So you can be the archer and you embody the god of archery, and you could be the water bearer, etc. And so these moves you do in dance, and they don't like for people that weren't taught by the source to teach the dances, because they
Yep.
say that it will like basically degenerate it, which I understand. But what I thought, my theory was, okay, so if they could create their sacred dances and channel these higher forms, because what I do is I can embody this higher state of consciousness while dancing through the movements. What I realized and what I theorized was I could probably create my own sacred movements that can allow me to tune into my higher self, and then that can within itself be created as a sacred dance. So now it's not only them that creates it, and it's almost like gatekeeping also. I believe it is kind of gatekeeping, but at the same time, it will only be perceived as gatekeeping if we don't understand the depths of it. So this is why I think this conversation is super important. But yeah, go ahead, man.
I think you'll find this interesting. And I don't remember the time frame. I want to say it was 1880, but that's completely off. But this idea of folkish psychology, the idea that so the folk, that's German. That's VOLK. V in German is pronounced with an F. Um, you have a kindred spirit that's shared between people of a genetic lineage. And so this idea of focused psychology is that you'll have genetic memory of your ancestors and whatever it is that your ancestors did. Now, we understand that this is probably just epigenetics in some way, shape, or form. Um, but in what you're talking about, of how these dance moves are sacred, and if you were to take an outsider to tap into it, then yeah, you would be watering it down. So is it gatekeeping in some way, shape, or form? Sure. Is that exactly wrong? Maybe not. Maybe not. But as you were saying, you can generate your own thing operating off of a current uh, to create sort of a new current. Um, think of like a literal current in like the air or the water. So like what is tailgating? Like driving down the highway, tailgating will suck you into the current of the vehicle in front of you so that you're actually using less momentum. You could do this with boating. If you're in the wake behind a boat, you can use that wake to your advantage. Birds. Why do birds fly in the patterns that they do? The birds in the back are resting on the current generated by the birds in front. And so birds in the front will lead the pack. As they get tired, they'll fall to the back. And the next guy in line will take over. So quite literally, if you imagine a literal physical current and use that operative concept in a speculative manner, yes, you could probably generate something off of those dance moves using something that's pre-existing and then add your own spin. And prior to this video, we were discussing how you will see that in Reiki. So it's like, okay, show me your symbol, right? And there are multiple symbols. If they do the wrong symbol, and you'll see symbols with hooks, okay, that's not the original symbol. What you're doing in that regard is you're creating a current between individuals, not a current from source. And so the dance moves, just like that, you're using the same current, but you're adding in a hook. And so that flow, that current would be through something else. Something like that, very basically speaking.
Yeah, I would say this is kind of the difference between horizontal and vertical. It's also something that was mentioned in the previous podcast where you generating your own thing is a horizontal thing. Well, not you generating your own thing, but you not tapping into source basically is a horizontal thing, which can also be
Okay,
very
interesting.
expansive and very useful. But the vertical thing would be you tapping directly to source, and so you bring that from the higher and you bring that here into the lower, and you ground those spiritual, I want to say powers or those spiritual insights into the horizontal plane.
Okay, that's actually very instructive for me because now I understand how that piece contextualizes the entire conversation that you guys had. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had that last mention of the horizontal and the vertical plane. You said that made a lot of sense. Anything you want to add with, with that pertaining to this conversation?
Um, at this exact moment, probably not. I think it's an interesting idea, and I mean it seems very reasonable to me. Again, as we were discussing, where are you deriving the energy from, and can you not just generate your own? Um, and I think that is the case, or at least if you're not generating your own, you are transmitting your own, or you're transmitting something. Quite probably.
Yeah. So I was reading. I'm looking at the book right now on Reiki. So you said you're a Reiki 2. Is that Reiki 2 and something else? Sorry.
Reiki 1, Reiki 2, Reiki 2 Advanced, Reiki Master, Walking the Dead. I'm trained in crystal healing, and I'm trained in auras.
Okay.
I
So do you
think
know how to
that's
see
everything.
auras?
Huh.
So you can see auras.
Yeah. I mean, anybody can. Anybody can. They could do it in 5 minutes if they know how. Because
Are
all
you
it
able
is, it's.
Are you able to see colors, or how is that? How is that experience?
Oh yeah. So, yeah, you'll see. I think 7 colors. It's just like seeing a rainbow. So if the colors are present, then the colors are present. I don't know. Like it. Again, anybody can do this. So if you just start looking around at objects and you let your eyes not focus on any particular one thing, you'll just see colors pop off of anything and everything.
Okay. Yeah, I think I mean there has to be a use case to the aura. I know like in the book by Barbara Brennan on healing hands, or I think it's called Healing Hands. She uses the aura to kind of like diagnose, not diagnose because you can't officially diagnose, but to really see any issues that are stemming. She even shows like little like energetic balls that resemble like little attachments, little, and this is pretty sick because I was thinking, I have this theory that fiction is very tuned into reality, but from the non-sensical perspective. And I might be using that word incorrectly. Nonsensical, as in not pertaining to the physical senses.
Okay, interesting.
Because I have this theory. There's this anime. I know you're not too familiar with anime, but there's this show, Jujutsu Kaisen, and basically the premise is that there's curses, and these curses can only be seen by the what's it called, the guys, the practitioners, the jujitsu guys, whatever. They see the curses and they hunt the curses. And the interesting thing is that is very much connected to reality, which is the curses grow the more you focus on them, and so they feed off a specific energy. And so there was like, for example, like a little parasite attached to this person, and it's like sucking on the person and like taking the energy from them. And there was this scene where the guy like kills the parasite right in front of the person, but she didn't even know. She just saw him like flick his hand, and she was like, "Oh, I feel so much better. Like, what'd you do?" It's like, "Oh, you just had a little something, like a little fly or something, whatever." But I thought that was so interesting because in real life, like healers can see like these energetic things, and what they basically do is they just clear them out. It's like this effect. So I thought that it was very interesting, and there's a lot more. At least that little tangent goes to. There's a lot more to be explored if you go into these things. You'll see connections between this and fiction, specifically anime in this context. But moving from there, I mean, did you want to add anything from there?
Yeah, so I actually have one small story pertaining to Reiki. My boss at the slaughterhouse decided on a whim, I guess. Um, he had some free time and he went to a Reiki place, I think just to kind of fuck with them, just troll them.
Yeah.
And the lady doing Reiki on him was picking up on something, and who knows if that's actually the case. He was not a particularly he looked like a normal guy, he acted like a normal guy, so there's nothing particularly off-putting about him. If you saw him at the comic book store or some like nerd convention, he would blend right in because he's a nerd. Like he's not like a hardened murderer, even though that is his occupation. But so she's doing Reiki on him, and she's like, "Holy shit! Like I'm getting like all sorts of really dark vibes from you. Like what is going on here?" And then he just casually let it slip. He's like, "Oh, it's all the bodies. That's what that is. It's just the bodies. The bodies, ma'am. So many bodies. I killed so many things." And she, I don't think, worked with him after that.
No way.
Yeah. No, I mean it's when you did your healing session on me, that's why I
Oh, I
immediately said
see.
before, it's like, hey, listen, if you want to do this, I'd appreciate it, but you are forming an energetic connection, and if there is any ability for that to transfer back and forth, that is something that I would want somebody to know. Just so you know, if this does go backwards, if this flows backwards into you, be ready.
It's actually very interesting because you know what, you're not wrong. I mean, I think in that moment, I was like, oh, I mean, I've done this for a while. You know, I've seen all kinds of things. Like, I don't really have like I know I cleared. There's specifically with entities and like in the body code. There's this. Um, it deals with entities, and I remember having done a session on my sister when she had her psychotic episode. Um, and she was getting all like an influx of so many like spiritual things happening and everything. Obviously, gates were open. It could be both positive and negative that came in, and and there was this like she just kept saying there was this demon, and that and she just kept twitching and doing weird things with her hands, and I was like, "What the hell?" So I checked, and I did the body code, and I did find that it was a demon. But the next thing you know, I also began to twitch, and I was like, "Oh shit, it's the like I got it now." And so I did the body code on myself, and it cleared out. But it was super interesting to see that because you're right. Like there is that possibility, and and it makes a lot of sense. I feel like so. Yeah, just adding that to what you just mentioned. What I wanted to get into was also okay, hands. So in terms of your experience, hands lighting up, um, I was reading in this book that hands of Reiki, like you have Reiki hands, something like that was
Yep.
mentioned.
Yep.
Um, I was thinking about how sometimes in my day-to-day life, when I find a moment that is very uh like it opens my mind and I see possibilities. I could be teaching or I could be speaking in a conversation, but when I really feel it, like I could feel light emanating from my hands, like whoa, like it's getting hot. I'm ready to, you know, deliver something. That's really what I feel. So I know in Reiki, there's definitely the use of the hands. Also, another thing that I wanted to add because this just came into my mind. There have been moments when, for example, my baby boy, and also in healing sessions like massaging.
Yep.
Even my sister, she caught a glimpse of this, which is like massages can serve as healing sessions also. So like it's almost like the light from the hands guides the individual to heal a specific area. And that has happened with me and my son, for example. He fell one time, he hit his head, and I was carrying him, I put him to sleep, but then like subconsciously my hands just moved to like this specific area by his neck, and I just started to rub that, and then it led me to subconsciously just or more not subconsciously, intuitively just move through his whole body and just like really release everything, whatever it was. I believe it to have been the trauma from the hitting himself itself. And after that he was able to sleep for like 2 hours, which I know that like he takes like 30-minute naps. Like for him to sleep that long is it must have been that, so let's let's hit those 3 points and we can maybe we can put them together. So the first one being hands during conversation, in moments of where I'm feeling like this is going to be a big moment. The second one, hands intuitively moving and guiding me to healing my son and potentially other clients. And then three, massages. I know that there's Reiki massages, so putting those together.
Yeah. So I mean, like the whole body is a sensory organ. The mind itself is uh, a means of sensory perception. Um, and just as you know, what is speaking? Speaking is transmission. So just as the hands can sense, they could also probably transmit, but so can the whole body. Essentially speaking, we are um, organisms of not only perception but also transmission. It's just that the hands are what we use in Reiki. but you could probably use that. Uh, it runs through your whole body. It's just that your hands are specifically attuned in addition to your crown and brow chakra. Or it might just be the crown. I'm not sure if they do anything with the brow. Um, but, you know, if you feel your hands lighting up or just activating, I mean, you're probably picking something up, right? And it doesn't have to be the hands, it could be anything. Um, but I mean, everybody has like a language of the body, language of the mind that's specific to them. So if your hands are the sensory organ, then that would be what you're going to interface with, and probably what you'd use for transmission. Um, I'm sure if you did like really intense meditation, you might be able to identify the same feeling throughout your body. That might just need a little bit of developing awareness, something like that. And then, yeah, in regards to your son, I mean, again, perception. If it's your hands, and you just kind of do a general scan over anything for that matter, if you pick something up, then you're picking something up, and if you're transmitting something, then you're transmitting something. Um, Again, is any of this real? Who knows? Does it work? If it works, then it works. Who cares at that point? Something's going on. Um, I guess that's all I have to say in that regard.
Yeah. What about the massages? There are Reiki
Oh,
massages, right?
yep. So Reiki massage, in some states, you can't practice Reiki, unless you are also a licensed massage therapist. Now, you don't actually have
Interesting.
to touch somebody to do Reiki. Again, you could do distant Reiki, or you could just do hover hands. Um, that's really uh, the comfortability of the actual practitioner. Um, I know I've had to practice on some very curvy women, and at one point, at a certain point in the Reiki process, you have to flip over. Um, and so, just as a general rule, for me specifically, I'm all hover hands. I'm not touching anybody. If there
Yeah.
is any sort of flow back between individuals, if they're looking for Reiki, they're looking for healing. They're not looking for an energetic flow. So, if I have anything going on with me, just as a precaution, you're getting hover hands. I don't care how comfortable you are or you don't feel like it's working or not. I'm just not doing it. And that's just really about me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've had some curvy women be like, "No, put your hands on me," and it's like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. Man, woman, no. Animals, you know, because you could do Reiki on animals.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't need to.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to. It's not necessary. Reiki's a current, and if it can't surpass that couple inches of barrier, then so be it. Um, I think that if there's anything at all that's flowing, if you can't generate a flow that's strong enough, then try harder or just tune in harder or something like that. I don't think you need to touch somebody to have that happen.
Yeah. I think I would agree, but also there has to be nuances for sure, like you mentioned. Like I think I mean, I feel like every modality is there for a reason. For example, but also like pertaining to what you said, like yeah, I mean, I remember seeing this one Instagram where this guy is massaging these women, and obviously they're attractive women, and it's a guy, and he's getting a lot of views because they're attractive women, and he's also um, like there's to relieve stress, like you have to like pull hair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to see because I'm like, damn. I mean, like this guy knows what he's doing. Obviously, using this women to market his services. I mean, but I mean, I hope. I mean, I believe that. I mean, if he's at that level and he's got these kinds of people and this kind of attention, I believe like he has to be doing this ethically. It's just taking advantage of the marketing, and also the women like to. These women obviously like to be seen. Like they're like models or celebrity, not celebrities, but or Instagram girls, etc., etc. So I mean, yeah, I mean that was something interesting. It does bring up some questions even for myself. Like I think there would be if there were to be massages. I think it would only be for like very limited use cases. To be honest, at least in my experience,
I mean,
and
massage works.
right,
We know that. Massage works. We know that. So I'm sure that if you were to actually incorporate actual contact Reiki and massage, I mean, yeah, you're activating cells. You're incorporating tissue massage and deep tissue massage. Um, Reiki's energy. Cells are energy. So the Reiki current is operating off of the energetic level. If you were to incorporate the actual material component, well, the material component we know is doing something. Um, so the Reiki is probably potentiating that. I would
yeah,
imagine it has to. It has to. If Reiki is
yeah,
real at all and it's actually doing something, then the massage is only going to help it increase in efficiency and effectiveness.
yeah. Okay. Um. So yeah, there's a massage. So there's a component to Reiki that you can massage, and in some states you have to have at least a license to
Yep.
massage. Okay. Going into, I think I want to go back to psychology,
Oh yeah.
because I actually want to take this somewhere. And we only have like 5-10 minutes. I think this will be good. Um, I believe I was just thinking and reflecting on how the current system around psychology, which is you have to take the you have to get a PhD to be considered an actual clinical psychologist, and also that might even take away from you learning to integrate that practice with other practices such as holistic healing. I haven't, I don't have experience with that, but I'm thinking even for myself because I do want to get the licensing and get the approval, so I'm not in any issues with the system itself. But I mean, I found something to be more effective than the modern psychology, and I'm curious about what if right now what really needs to happen is for there to be an integration between the holistic healing and the psychological space. I believe that to heal somebody psychologically, you also have to consider the other aspects, not just the mental, but also the emotional and the physical. And most of the time, it's going to require an integrative approach rather than just a one-dimensional. Hey, here's some pills. Here's some, to balance out the brain chemicals, etc. Um, so I think that I believe that there is an issue, or at least there is an opportunity for people to continue to expand on in the health space, and there might even be a necessity for a revolution in the psychological field when we're seeing these things and they're coming up and they're working, for example.
Um, I think it's important to kind of cover this topic I'm about to bring up very briefly. So I think a lot of people misunderstand. Um, so there's a trinity. There's psychology, there's psychiatry, and there's counseling, and those are three separate fields, um, operating off of three separate premises, and utilizing three separate techniques, essentially speaking. Psychiatry is a medical doctor. So you go through 8 years of medical school, if I'm understanding correctly, and then another 4 years for specifically psychiatry. Um, that is a medical doctor who is looking at the material means and attempting to address psychological concerns with the use of pharmaceuticals. It's a medical doctor. Uh, a counselor um, is somebody who needs 2 years of graduate school. It's not necessary that they have an undergraduate degree in psychology. You can have any undergraduate degree. All you need is like a handful of prerequisite courses. And their whole premise is healing, very loosely speaking, through talk therapy. Now, you could find processes like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavioral therapy, whatever, however, it's talk therapy. A psychologist, on the other hand, you need a PhD. So there's no master's degree for psychology. You don't necessarily need an undergraduate degree, as far as my understanding goes, but you probably should have one. A psychologist, it's a broad topic, right? You're more so looking at behavior, how the mind is processing input, how it's externalizing output. It's not really therapy. It's more of how is the mind manifesting itself. So if you were to see a psychologist, that's a very short-lived thing, or at least it can be. Therapy, on the other hand, is a very long-term thing. Once you get into therapy, you really don't leave. Realistically speaking, therapy is
Wait,
an ongoing.
do you think that? I mean, I'll let you finish because I know you're clarifying this. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really comment too specifically because I am kind of outside my wheelhouse. I do research. I don't do therapy, and I don't really. If I see a client, it's for something very specific, and it's really not for therapy. Um, but I'm not. To clarify, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just a guy with a master's degree, which is very rare in psychology. Um, a psychologist is largely looking at again how is the mind actually operating and assessing if there's any maladaptive behaviors, maladaptive thought processes, and kind of just pointing that out and then letting the client go back into the world. But there's all sorts of different psychologists. I mean, let's say you have an industrial and organizational psychologist. That's a corporate psychologist.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a sports psychologist. Well, a sports psychologist, you're really just working with athletes and figuring out what are the mental processes that they're going through that you can either accentuate or eliminate so that your clientele is able to function a lot more optimally. So you're not really seeing them in the same sense of a therapist. You're not asking them, and how does that make you feel? That's just not what you're doing.
Okay. So, yeah, I know. I think that when I said that, I kind of did a little bit of all three. Um, yeah. In regards to psychology, the field, though, um, that would definitely have the counselors, the psychologists, and basically psychiatrists, right? Sort of.
Sort of, very loosely, basically speaking, yes. but I think the distinction, it can be meaningful to understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I mean, like, again, if you're speaking with a therapist, how much do they really know about actual psychology? Realistically speaking, because look at their coursework, look at their practicum. They're trained in counseling, which is very basically how do you have a warm affect. You're not really
Yeah.
getting training or education in actual matters of the mind because it's not relevant to their purview.
So
I
would you say that with the thing, even like for example, my work, like everything that I'm about, I'm thinking about, and then we'll have this be the last point. I'm thinking about being a psychologist, like getting the license, getting a PhD, only because I want to be able to make the claims of the mind and these findings that I have, um, and integrate them. Also, almost develop a much more comprehensive approach to transformation. I believe, and so that's why it's almost like I have this critique around psychology because they don't look outside. I mean, this is very general. I believe that there's probably other psychologists that do, but from the mainstream ones that I see, there's definitely this lack of spiritual understanding, um, and it's very very just dry. I feel like.
yeah, I think that that's more so a side effect of the field within the current zeitgeist as a whole. I mean, I was very disappointed and very off put from the field as a whole. The more that I studied what current PhD candidates are studying and who, um, oh, there's a word for it, but I don't. Basically, you can look at, go to any school's website and just look at what the current PhD candidates are researching and look at the guys who are running it, what their field of research is in. Because if that guy is not really, or girl, I'm using guy in a gender neutral sense. Um, if they study something very specific, they're not going to take you on as a student. Um, so, I mean, for example, when I was looking at grad school for a PhD, I was looking at the staff, the head of the research department, what they studied, um, what research they were currently conducting, their body of work, um, and it would be all these people who are studying stuff of like the impacts of pornography on the mind or gender expression in uh, kiwi birds in sub-Saharan Africa or like whatever. So it's very splintered and it's ultra specific. And is that really the field of psychology that everybody knows and understands? Um,
And it's like
so
relevant. I mean,
right,
to transformation, health,
right,
etc.
right. So I mean, it to me it was very soul crushing. And I looked at all the local colleges. I looked at abroad. I looked online. Um, I mean, there are a bunch of great programs, but it's getting accepted into the programs and then looking at the types of research that uh, you're likely to get approved for. Um, because again, if your um, advisor, I don't remember the term off the top of my head. I've been out of school for a good number of years, and it's been a very long time since I thought about a doctorate. But
Yeah.
there's a term. Again, if the guy that you're looking for to take you on under their wing, if you're not at least within one step of their work, it's not happening. It's just not. Um, So for something like what you and I are probably interested in researching and could bringing to the field, who's doing that, and how likely is just like an average person going to be able to get into that field of applicants? Um, I think one school that I was looking at, which is a very, very good school, um, probably one of the best. I think they had 100 to 500 applicants a year, and they would only select two. And so
Damn.
your cohort is two applicants every 4 years, something like that.
Well,
And so if you're not really made of money and you don't have like a really good background and like a body of your own work, while you're competing with 100, 500 people, how are you going to differentiate yourself and be selected? So, I mean, like for me, I went the master's route, so that won't actually get me anywhere official. I can't do lab work, officially speaking, but at the very least, I can conduct independent research. Will I get peer reviewed? No. Can I get peer reviewed by an alternative journal? Potentially. And that's just the way, if you want to do this, then that's going to be the price to pay.
yeah. So I guess we're gonna leave it at this point. I'm just gonna add one more thing because I do have to get going.
Yeah.
I think I'm curious with you even. I mean, like, personally, you and um, I want to. I mean, I'm thinking about a path for myself, the most optimal path, and even counseling for me. I don't know if I want to be because I'm looking at like the curriculum right now for a PhD, and they want you to basically do your hours, right, of clinical counseling.
Yep.
I wonder if even counseling for myself if that's really what I want to do, because I really want to approach this from a very top down perspective where it's like not one on one, it's like a systematic change.
Yeah.
And there's no way that if I were to put those years into this PhD or PsyD, um, would it be worth it? Am I cutting off the potential to help? And this is something very important, and we can leave this for a future conversation. But there's a YouTuber. He's also a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and he says that he chose to go this route because he also practices Ayurveda, and he had this whole
Oh,
debate
interesting.
with another medical doctor about Ayurveda, and he said that I could choose to go this route of trying to prove the research and go through these like basically bullshit systems of validating and peer reviews and et cetera, or I could just practice it and just help people in the now versus
Yeah.
trying having to wait for these guys to present the research and then somebody else then later within the next 10-20 years they can start to use it. And that's a very interesting point that I saw, because I was like, damn, like I think what I want is to just get the license just so that nobody can
Yeah.
but doing the work is something that I'm already doing, and so yeah, that's something very important.
I mean, if you're going to go through counseling, that's probably your quickest way to do it. You're still going to have to go through a lot of coursework. You are going to need the prerequisites. Um, you do need to be accepted into the program. And there's no way around it. You are going to have to do it the practicum. Um, and that's going to be, it's 600 hours. So however you manage 600 hours is however you manage 600 uh, supervised hours. So are you going to be able to do that 40 hours a week? Probably not, you know? Um, and then you need to be reviewed, and then you need to actually go through the licensure. And then you can possibly deal with getting your license revoked if you're not following the actual guidelines and the ethics involved. And again, really going back to counseling is not really psychology. It's just a different body of work. Um, and to kind of comment on what you were talking about, um, you were mentioning why bother with research? Why not just go like something like counseling and just try to help people in the here and now? Um, I mean, I've tried that. You can do alternative therapy. You don't need licensure. You do need credentials. You do need training. Um, but I found out very quickly. I think you and I had this discussion. Um, my core clientele were all the tough guys with like really hardcore pasts. I could work with them one on one. I could not work with kind of like the new wave of uh, don't take this the wrong way, but anime dweebs. I
Yeah.
couldn't connect with them. Those were not my people. Those were not people that I understood. And so it's like, oh, I'm being bullied at school. I just want to hit somebody with my katana. Okay, man, what's a katana? It's a sword. Who gave you a sword, dude? What are you talking about? But a tough dude, it's like, hey, sometimes people get up in my face and I want to bust their teeth out. And it's like, hey, man, yeah, yeah. If somebody's bothering you and you tell them politely, dude, you're bothering me, you're in my face. I'm using words, I'm communicating, I'm being empathetic, but you are really not giving me any space here. I'm communicating, you hit a boundary, and I'm telling you, get out of my boundary. And so it's working with guys like that who I don't know, like there's just something more real to it to me. I associate with them, it makes sense to me. But you're gonna have to work. There's no way around it. You are going to have to work with people that you don't necessarily understand. And maybe you don't really want to work with them, but you have to. Unless you want to go completely independent, and that has its own problems. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know, man. Like there's a lot to it.
Yeah. We'll definitely go into it deeper. I think this is a good point to jump out of. Um,